Thank you very much. First time I've done something like this. I'm very pleased to be here. I know probably everyone says that when they do this, but for me it's slightly different. I've spent the last 30 years living or working in London. How many of you live or work in London? A show of hands? So a few of you. I moved to KFC about a year ago, and I've really missed the place. I've missed coming to London, and every time I go past the railway station with my wife, I say to her, I miss going on the train. And she kind of reminds me, I don't actually miss going on the train. I miss going on the new trains. Years ago, going on the old 125s, I don't know if anyone remembers those. You had the slamming doors, and you had to open the window and turn the handle from outside. They were always absolutely crammed, they were always breaking down, and they were delayed. And I don't miss those. The new trains, the Hitachi 800s, there's a lot more space. They run on time, they're comfortable, and, the seats are comfortable. With those old 125s, as much as they dress them up, the seats were uncomfortable. I remember someone saying that the seats have seen more arses than a proctologist. It's much nicer environment on the train now. Anyway, let's start. Where do I point this? Here? Here we go. Right. KFC. Who are KFC? Well, I'm sure. Another question. Who's had KFC in the last year? Anyone? Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you for paying me. I appreciate that. I was talking to one of the vendors yesterday, and I said I was from KFC, and they gave me a look like, get off my stand. What are you doing here? We're a big company. In the UK, we've got over 1,000 restaurants. We serve 500,000 meals every single day. Over the course of a year, we sell 1 billion items. In total, Sorry, I'm getting a bit of feedback. Sorry about that. I'll stay here and not move around. The business is worth about 1.7 billion a year. So, it's a big-sized company. We're also part of Yum Group, if anyone's heard of those, international. So KFC, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, 35,000 restaurants worldwide. So, it's a good-sized organisation. But we've got an issue with our current platform, and I'm sure it's an issue we all have got. It's getting old. The hardware is about 5 years old now. We're running on a version SQL Server that's 10 years old. We've got a lot of data. I think our biggest table has about 8.5 billion records in it, and SQL really starts to struggle with that. And this then causes performance issues, which I'm sure we're all used to. Once you start getting big tables, indexes slow down, queries slow down. The next load of processes that come along queue up too long because of what's going on. And so it just builds up and causes problems. Also, as I mentioned, we're part of Yum. And Yum need to start getting a better view over what's happening across all their brands and across all their territories. And although we can provide data to them at the moment, it's not particularly streamlined. We have to create extracts, we send them over, they have to reformat it. And as an organisation, we need a better way of working with this data. So it was decided we need a new platform, we need a new warehouse. So the first thing was, well, what are we going to do? It's going to go cloud. Everyone's doing cloud, obviously. The first decision, which platform? AWS, really simple one. We already have a relationship with AWS. Next one, database. What are you going to use for that? Quite a few options, but Snowflake was the obvious case, I think, for us. The performance you get from it, the ability to scale, and the fact that we could pretty much take our queries and just move them straight over from SQL Server onto Snowflake was a winner. For our front-end reporting at KFC, we use MicroStrategy. And MicroStrategy have done a lot of work with Snowflake, and they convinced us this is just going to work. So that was pretty much an easy decision to make. We next needed a strategic partner. KFC, in fact, the whole of Yum does a lot of work with partners. So. We started working with Brilio. I know you can see Avinash there. I don't know if the rest of the team are around here today. They'd done a lot of work with us in the US as well, so they knew our business. They knew how we worked, so that was another easy decision. The next decision was, well, what are we going to use for an ETL tool? There's a huge number in the market, and the obvious one, for me anyway, was Matillion. I'd like to tell you a little story about how I came to work with Matillion, not directly. At my previous company, we were doing a warehouse project. It was a like for like, moving into the cloud, and talking to the business, they were not prepared to accept aggregate testing for UAT. They wanted field level testing. So the worst case scenario for us was our biggest table, which had about 400 million rows in it, 50 columns wide, so 20 billion data fields. They wanted us to compare. And it's like, God, how are we going to do this? So we worked out how we would actually do this analysis between these two sets of data. But then we found out we can't actually do this on SQL Server. It's too slow. We just cannot get the performance for this volume. We found out, yeah, we can do it on Snowflakes, and then comes the next issue. How are we going to get that data to Snowflake? We used SSIS. What we found with that was it took a long time to run. We could only maybe move about a year's worth of data before the thing just crapped out. We started looking at other tools, some of whom are out here today, and we had similar problems. We found that, it would just max out the machine. We could only ever move about a year's worth of data. It would take half a day, and it just wasn't working. And all this was taking up development time. I was talking to my boss at the time. I said, I really want to have a look at this Matillion tool. He said, all right, go on, have a little go. It's pay as you go. It's not going to cost us much. We spun up an instance. We got everything connected. And 9 o'clock in the morning, I sat down, 2 screens. I got the Matillion UI. I've got their help. And I started having a go. Within 15 minutes, I'd created my first extract into Snowflake. And it worked. Brilliant. Within 45 minutes, I'd built the extract for all of our warehouse, and just hit the button, had meetings, came out at the end of the day, and it was done. Everything was in. The space of one day, we managed to achieve what we couldn't with our other platforms, and we had, really sharp engineers working on this for weeks, just really struggling to make this thing work. So, I was a convert to Matillion right at that point. So what is it that I like about Matillion? I will say also, Avinash, who I mentioned earlier, did a lot of work with us just to verify before we signed up with Matillion at KFC. The connectors. I've not come across any connectors or any data sources we can't connect to yet. With our other tools, yes, we could do that, but we always ended up to kind of hack around to actually get there. The product's matured a lot since when I started working with it. So it doesn't look like a kind of a 3-year-old tool, which it isn't. And it's built for cloud first. I think that's really, really important here. Unlike a lot of other tools where it's a bolt-on, this is something developed specifically for working with the cloud. And for our organization, the whole low-code, no-code is important as well. What we're wanting to do is, instead of having to kind of recruit engineers who have a whole load of skills lined up, Python, Airflow, DBT, whatever it's going to be, instead of kind of employing coders, we want people who will work with the data, can work with the business, can understand it. And so, I found that Matillion helps us with that as well. It doesn't require this kind of extra level of skills to get the thing working. It's kind of, just drag and drop and connect stuff and away you go. It also runs on your own tin. That's important for our organisation. Because we're on pretty much every single continent, we're working with partners outside the EU, which means then we have privacy issues with PII. And so that was very important to the business, that we aren't in a position where our data could accidentally leak. Matillion helps us there because it sits on our own EC2 instances. It's on our own hardware. They don't see anything that we're doing. We've got complete control over it. And I think one of the other bits was that reusability of code. Coming from an SSIS environment, it's quite easy for us to pick up a lot of the SQL that we use already and just move it over, stick it into orchestrations or builds, however we want to do it. And it's just working for us. So one of the things that came down from management for the project was that they wanted to see early deliveries. We recognised this was a 2+ year project, but they wanted to see some benefit within year one. And we're trying to think, well, how the hell are we going to do that? And the decision was, what we're going to do, we're going to break it up into waves. So we'll deliver different chunks of the entire warehouse at different times, so we can start seeing that early delivery, which is a really great way of approaching it until you start thinking about, well, how's that going to work with analytics if data's in different places? So Atlas is our SQL Server warehouse. Metis is our Snowflake warehouse. Analytics we're using MicroStrategy primarily, but any other kind of analytics we want to do. If we're trying to connect the data from these two separate sources, there's really only two ways you can do it. You've either got to extract everything into a third system, or what you have to do is choose one of them to be your primary and copy data from one side to the other. So if we did that and we make Atlas our primary, well, we've gained no benefit with all the work that we've been doing, because we're now just pushing everything back into SQL Server. If we want to go the other way, if anyone's ever used the ODBC connector in Snowflake, you'll know the limitations of it. You're only able to shift, a couple of 100,000 rows, whatever it is, at a time, which makes it really, really slow. We were finding that the reports that we were previously running completely off Atlas, or SQL Server, which had taken 10 minutes, were now taking 20 because of the time it just took to shift that data over. And so this was a real problem for us. And we were thinking, what we really would like is a tool that would help us to achieve this. Maybe something that could work off CDC, so would be able to recognise the inserts, deletes, and updates, and also one that wouldn't require a lot of coding, that would follow that principle of low code that we've got. Also one that would work with Matillion ETL. That's the direction we're going, so it makes sense that any new tool would work with that as well. And on those principles, we didn't want to go invest a huge amount of money in a tool when we just want to test if this thing's going to work, first of all. We're thinking, does such a tool exist? Is there such a tool out there? And Matillion came to the rescue with Data Loader, which achieves all that. It enables us to just point it with a few clicks at a bunch of tables in our production environment, copy those out into S3, and then we can load those into Snowflake. We can set the schedule when that's going to run, so we could almost have it live or once a day based on when those tables get updated. Which gets us to this position where we can effectively simulate, if you want, the data being produced in our current warehouse in Snowflake without having to do all that heavy lifting through ETL initially. We can develop this on the strategy that we've got using waves. And, at the moment we've broken it down into 4 waves, but the reality is with MDL, we've got the ability to break this up into smaller chunks. We can almost turn this into sprints and just release tables as and when we want to. So it gives us a lot more control over what we want to do moving forwards. And, we've tested this with MicroStrategy as well. The whole thing's working nicely. And that's the next phase we're working on. So Wave 1's about to go live. We now need to support that by putting in MDL to copy over additional tables that we need to support that. I'll also say, which isn't actually in the slides, I forgot it, another area where Matillion has really helped us is because we've got a ton of historic data, our new process was never going to go back and pick up that history and reprocess it all. All we could ever do is go, right, let's just drag that data over from on-prem and stick it in Snowflake. So we're able to use Matillion for that as well. So we're using Matillion for our daily deltas, if you want to put it that way, for loading our history and for keeping tables which aren't built using Matillion in sync in Snowflake as well. I will say, full disclosure, I'm not being paid by Matillion. They've not done anything for me, which is very nice. They've not even given me a coffee yet. They didn't give me a T-shirt. I had to bring my own. They didn't even buy my ticket to come into this event. So, I feel that I'm justified in saying what I think about the product. I think bits that need working on still, tighter integration into Git. There is Git integration, but it's more kind of you have to check the entire solution in and out. And when we've got a team of 6 developers, that can be a bit awkward. I believe that's in the pipeline for being fixed. I'm looking at Robin to see if it is being fixed. Okay, good. Support for data governance. It used to have a data governance component in there, and they took that out and replaced it with an API, which is really handy. But there's only a handful of vendors who actually support that at the moment. Calibra is the main one. And one of the nice features that was released earlier this year is the hub. The hub enables you to view your account, work with your instances, all that sort of stuff. And so it's a really helpful platform. But I think there's a few little gaps in there. So you don't get a sense really, I think, of your spend, how many credits you've got left, when you're likely to run out. You can download your logs, which is absolutely great. But if you've got multiple instances of metal running, you can't see which one's consuming which credits. So you have to kind of work it out yourself based on when you know things are scheduled to run. So I think there's a little bit of tweaking there that needs to be done. But, you know, minor things. Is that all right? Good. So getting back to the whole point of this talk, how does this help us moving forwards? One of the big ones for me, basket analysis. It's something the business asks us to do, but we do it very, very, very rarely, because it takes like 4 hours on our current platform. And because of those limitations, we provide that information to the business in Excel. So you've got a 1,000,000-row limit on what we could do with a single worksheet there. So it's not ideal. Now we've got data, historic data in Snowflake. I've taken those scripts for our basket analysis, ported them over to Snowflake with a little bit of tweaking, and those jobs which were taking 4 hours on-prem run in under 30 seconds. And so that becomes a real game changer for us, because that puts us in the position where we can now start making this something the business runs instead. We can put this into MicroStrategy. The business now can control that. I think one of those movements to the cloud also is this shift from ETL to ELT. It seems minor, but how it helps us, I think it's just a mind shift, that it gets you to this position of looking at putting data into like a raw area, a staging area, and allowing the business to work with it. The way we've traditionally worked is, you know, the business would come along, they'd tell us what they want to do, we'd spec it out from source through to reports, you know, soup to nuts. And it's a slow process for the business. Moving to this new platform enables us to get that data in there. We can then start, just give it to the business, go have a look at it. We can do a minimal amount of cleaning and tidying up of the data, and they can see if there's value in it before we start looking at, okay, how do we want to work with this? How do we want to bring it to the warehouse? What changes do we need to make to it? And then we've got deeper integration with the APIs as well. So there's quite a lot of APIs Matillion have got. So I mentioned earlier about how we can use that for data lineage. You can also use it for firing off jobs. I was doing it at my last place. You know, I'd have SSIS jobs would complete, and then they would call Matillion jobs as well to carry on to get data into Snowflake. So basically that's it. And to me, I think a lot of those old ETL tools we've got are much like that old Intercity 125 with slamming doors. They kind of can work in the environment we've got now, but they're not ideal. They're not really built for it. Where I see Matillion as being more like the Hitachi 800. It's built for modern architecture. It's built for the way we work and the way we live now. And so it's a much more suitable tool than just a bolt-on to some of the other tools you've got. Look at that. Bang on. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for coming. Cheers.